Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Rain Musngi. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. On today's episode of Follow the Money, we dive deep into how EU businesses can elevate their investments in Southeast Asia, particularly with a rising market like the Philippines. We'll discuss key challenges and opportunities in enhancing business ties while examining strategies for both the EU and the Philippines to foster stronger economic cooperation. Our guest today is Humphries, Executive Director of the EU-ASEAN Business Council, who will provide insights based on recent trends in EU-ASEAN relations. Chris, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Rain. Thank you for having me.
To start, can you kindly give us an overview of the EU-ASEAN Business Council's role these days in facilitating trade and investment between European businesses and Southeast Asia, especially in the past year up to this year?
Yes, certainly. So the Council was established about 10 years ago with a very simple remit. It's to improve the trade and investment climate in Southeast Asia for European businesses. So we do our work by engaging with ASEAN member states like the Philippine government and also with ASEAN regional bodies, trying to make sure that there are changes happening which will help European businesses invest more and trade more with Southeast Asia for the benefit of Southeast Asian citizens.
Right, and you shared a business sentiment survey with us conducted this past year, and it shows that 86% of European businesses intend to increase trade and investment in ASEAN over the next 5 years. How does this translate specifically for the Philippines?
Well, for the Philippines, the number was around 60% saying they intended to expand their business operations. Only around 5% said they intended to contract, which actually was one of the lowest contraction levels across the region. So I think that's good news for the Philippines. We see a lot of potential in the Philippines going forward. And once we have the EU-Philippines FTA in place at some point in the not-too-distant future, I'd expect trade and investment numbers to grow further.
What is the likelihood of the FTA passing through in each and every country?
Well, it's a remit for the European Commission to negotiate. The negotiations formally kick off next month. And the discussions I've had recently with officials on both sides, there's a lot of optimism that this deal can actually progress pretty quickly. And we're looking at a 2 to 3 year horizon, perhaps to get the deal finalized. And that's, in FTA terms, is a pretty rapid negotiation. When you think the EU has been negotiating with Indonesia now for almost 9 years and hasn't concluded, if we can conclude with the Philippines within a 3 year horizon, so before the end of the Marcos administration's term in office, and before the Philippines may lose its GSP plus trade preferences with Europe, that's a remarkable achievement. And everyone I talk to is very optimistic this can move fast.
Have you encountered any obstacles or protests against the FTA's passage here in the country?
Not from European businesses for sure, and not from anybody I've spoken to in the Philippine business world either. Everybody seems to want this deal to happen. It'll be a big boon for both. So if you look at what happened between the EU and Vietnam on the back of their FTA, we saw a huge amount of increase in trade, huge amount of increase in investment from Europe into Vietnam. It can only be good news for the Philippines.
Okay, back to our business sentiment survey. Despite ASEAN's appeal, 88% of respondents cite supply chain barriers as a major challenge. How can the Philippines improve its logistics infrastructure to attract more European investment?
Well, I think there are two things that need to happen in terms of reducing barriers to supply chains. One is improve the infrastructure, so make the ports and airports and the roads and rail systems much better. The other one is on the regulatory side of life, particularly when it comes to customs procedures. Every country in the region needs to make those procedures easier to navigate with faster clearances as well, and that's particularly true in the Philippines.
Comparing the Philippines' infrastructure, logistics infrastructure with the rest of the region, how do we fare?
Well, you're not at the bottom, but you're not at the top. I mean, okay, someone like Singapore will be at the top. Malaysia's pretty near the top. There are improvements you need to make, but I would put you probably in the third or fourth or maybe fifth ranking across the region as a whole. You're a long way from other parts of the world, so we need to perhaps improve the number of air links and air connectivity. That's a commercial decision for airlines to make. But it's the ports and the airports, the infrastructure there. If we can get them to be a bit more modern in many respects, so the flows can come through easier, and there's more space for logistics operations to happen, that would be a big plus.
Thank you so much for that assessment, Chris. So now, non-tariff barriers in ASEAN have reportedly increased, with 40% of respondents in 2024 indicating this issue. In your view, what should the Philippines prioritize to address these non-tariff barriers and make itself a more attractive investment destination?
Well, I think the Philippines needs to work with its ASEAN partners. ASEAN itself is going through an upgrade of its trades in goods agreement. That is the one that we're all looking at very carefully to see what happens there and how that will tackle non-tariff barriers going forward. This is a collective effort. It's not just a Philippines problem. It's a problem right across Southeast Asia. And all member states in ASEAN need to do more in tackling this. I think the Anti-Red Tape Authority in the Philippines does a pretty good job. They perhaps need to expand the looks and what's happening on non-tariff barriers as well. There's a number of issues coming out on the customs side which also need to be addressed.
All right, well, given that only 2% of businesses consider ASEAN customs procedures efficient, what can the Philippines do to improve customs procedures and stand out as a business-friendly environment for EU investors?
Move completely to paperless trade, move completely to expedited clearance systems, particularly for low-value goods coming into the country. I think when they are working on new regulations, test them out first with the industry. Get industry's complete feedback before you go and implement them. Industry is one that's always best placed to say what works and what doesn't work. We need to improve customs procedures right across Southeast Asia, and the Philippines, I'm afraid, falls into that as well. The Bureau of Customs is making advances. They are moving forward, but we'd like to see a bit quicker movement.
Chris, on the side, what kind of categories of products and services are dominating trade between the EU and ASEAN right now? And is there a category that you feel the Philippines may not be maximizing or optimizing at the moment that we should be looking into?
Well, the Philippines does very well in certain areas, like business services, of course. Financial services dominates a lot of the trade. Quite naturally, European financial institutions are very prominent here in Southeast Asia. Machinery, automotive, agricultural products are also ones that are very prominent. I think for the Philippines looking forward, and I think once we do have the FTA in place, I'd expect to see a lot more agricultural exports to the EU. I'd expect to see a lot more commodity exports to the EU. And I think the Philippines themselves need to be looking at moving up the value chain when it comes to manufacturing. So you're elevating yourself up, perhaps doing more things in the high-end electronic space.
Certainly, but we are pausing for a quick break. Stay tuned as we discuss how the Philippines can further unlock its potential as a hub for European investment, despite existing challenges in the region. Follow the Money. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Follow the Money. We're still with Chris Humphries of the EU-ASEAN Business Council. Chris, European businesses seem increasingly concerned about the complexity of adhering to sustainability regulations, particularly the European Green Deal. Can the Philippines align its environmental policies, you think, to support this while remaining competitive?
I think they can. In the discussions I've had with officials, certainly in DTI very recently, they seem less concerned about the European Green Deal than some of their counterparts elsewhere in Southeast Asia. The European Green Deal poses challenges. It poses challenges for European businesses. The compliance requirements, the reporting requirements, all add cost and burden for European businesses, for businesses in Southeast Asia as well. But I think the important thing is, in the discussions I've had again with Philippine officials and indeed with EU officials around the FTA, the Philippines seems less concerned about some of the EU sustainability requirements. I think that's a recognition. You know, in the Philippines, you're rather prone to climate change issues. You're prone to extreme weather issues. You know you need to deal with climate issues, and the Marcos regime is clearly making strides in that direction. So I think when it comes to the EU Green Deal, there are less concerns about the Philippines and Europe on that issue, although all businesses everywhere do have concerns about the cost of compliance.
So, sorry, can you apprise us as to when the deadline for that will be, and if there are any loopholes or gaps that we still have, not just in the Philippines but in the region, what should we be focusing on further in complying with the Green Deal?
The Green Deal composes a number of different elements, and they've all got different timelines for implementation. So the carbon border adjustment mechanism is already in place and will be fully functioning by next year. The EU's deforestation regulation won't come into effect until next year and may hopefully be delayed further because the compliance regime is very complex for people to get their head around, and that includes European businesses as well. I think the key thing for all ASEAN member states, and particularly for the Philippines, is about greening your supply chains and greening your power systems. So moving faster on energy transition will be vital because, first of all, that naturally lowers your carbon footprint. It makes compliance with many EU regulations much easier, but it also boosts your attractiveness for investment going forward. There's already been signs of some companies pulling out of investments in the region, particularly in Vietnam recently, because they don't see that energy transition is happening fast enough.
Understood. Now, ASEAN regional integration is key, with 86% of businesses seeing it as crucial to their success. Are there collaborative steps between the EU and the Philippines that could strengthen integration and reduce trade barriers?
Well, the European Commission runs a number of projects across Southeast Asia to assist ASEAN and its member states with achieving closer economic integration. There are projects that run inside the Philippines called Arise Plus as well as part of that process. So there are things happening. The reason why economic integration is important to European businesses, by the way, is because we want to make greater use of regional value chains in Southeast Asia. And to do that, we need to make sure that we can move our goods and parts around the region much easier to feed our various factories in the region, then to boost exports.
Now, trade agreements are essential for growth, as you were mentioning. How do you see or foresee the current negotiations between the European Union and the Philippines on a free trade agreement progressing this year? And you were saying that you're expecting it might happen in the next 2 to 3 years. 9 years it has been in Indonesia. What impact could this have on investment? Like, in value terms, how much more trade should we be expecting if we finalize an FTA at the soonest possible time?
Well, I'll draw parallels with the FTAs that the EU's put in place with Singapore and Vietnam. And in both cases, we've seen a big uptick in trade. And I think in Vietnam's case, it's been around 30% increase in trade. You can expect the same sort of bump up with an FTA between the EU and the Philippines. Now, I do believe it will be a relatively easy deal to do. The economic team in the Marcos administration are very forward-looking. They seem very, very keen to do it. Europe is very, very keen to do it as well. We do have a finite deadline to achieve the deal, but I believe it will be achieved in the next 2 to 3 years.
On a more personal note, you've seen the evolution of EU-ASEAN relations over the years. What has been your most rewarding moment or achievement in fostering business ties? How does it inspire your work moving forward?
That's a very good question, because ASEAN's a very slow-moving beast at times. I think at the moment we are seeing engagement between Brussels and Southeast Asia at an all-time high, and I think the Council can take part of the credit for that. We've applied a lot of pressure on them to recommence negotiations with the Philippines and with Thailand, and hopefully soon with Malaysia as well. So I take pride that we may have hopefully moved the needle on that a bit. We've certainly moved the needle in some areas like the ASEAN Trades in Goods Agreement upgrade, and on other issues on a national level within the region. What really spurs me on, though, is working with the officials in the region. They are all generally very nice people to work with, to interact with. They're keen to hear our viewpoints. We're keen to hear their viewpoints, and it makes going to work a pleasure.
Talk about slow-moving needles. If I may, I'd like to ask, where would you like to see the Philippines move faster on? We are a very competitive nation. We can be. We hear that we are getting left behind by a few of our neighbors. Where are the loopholes and gaps coming from, you think? And where would you like to see it faster?
I think greening your power supplies, that's one area for sure that needs to happen. Improving infrastructure. So not just into Manila or into Clark, but across the whole archipelago as well, to allow businesses to span out more and get away from just Metro Manila area. I think they're the two areas I think that needs a lot more focus going forward.
Chris, always good to see you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a pleasure. Chris Humphries, Executive Director of the European Union ASEAN Business Council. As Chris shared with us, that stronger collaboration, reduced trade barriers, and enhanced regional integration are crucial for the Philippines to attract more European investment, ensuring mutual economic growth. Now, before we go, we leave you with this thought from Mark Mobius, Emerging Markets Fund Manager and founder of Mobius Capital Partners, and often called the founder of emerging markets investing. He said, Southeast Asia offers a unique blend of opportunity and innovation. It's where future investments should thrive. And that is it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I'm Rain Musngi. Thank you so much for watching, and keep it here on BNC, the Billionaire News Channel, always on top.